Cool, let's start. Yes, for those that are just joining, welcome. Good morning, good afternoon. It's really great to see so many of you joining. I was just checking the registration list ahead of this from their very different regions, perspectives, and backgrounds. My name is Laura Fortes. I represent GOGLA, and I'll be chairing this session today. So this is the first webinar in the End User Subsidy Lab on energy as a service. And maybe what I will do is to start with a bit of context on why we felt that this conversation really mattered right now. If we look back the last decade, our sector, the off-grid solar sector, has achieved something that's quite remarkable. Through mainly cash sales and pay-go models, millions of households have been reached, and millions of people have access to electricity for the very first time. Itself is a huge success story, and one that I think should not be understated. However, we're also reaching some limits to these models at the moment. So we see first that there are households that cannot manage the upfront costs, but then also we see communities where it is very expensive to serve them because they're either remote, they are dispersed, or they're hard to reach. So energy access has come in the conversation for a while. If you think about it at its core, energy as a service is a simple shift. It's instead of households owning an asset, they will pay for a service that will provide them reliable electricity. And there's a provider that owns, maintains, and takes responsibility for the performance, something that's quite common in the world. However, it is not so common as first-time household electrification in Africa, and in some ways it is experimental and still raising lots of questions. So, I mean, I have to say that I posted about this webinar on my LinkedIn, and in the comment section, I saw quite some comments with different stakeholders with experience in South Africa, in Latin America, on how this model has worked. So that's exactly why we're here today. We cannot say it's completely new, but it's generally not scaled. Actually, before I go any further and we go ahead with the webinar, we'd love to sense check who is in the room. So there should be a poll launching soon on which perspective best reflects your interest in today's discussion on energy as a service. You see the options there: policy, financing, implementer, research, general interest, and learning. And I'll give it a few seconds. Okay, it's still changing quite a bit, but it looks like we have a very good mix, and it's more on the financing, donor, investor perspective, but there's also quite a few implementers and public sector. I mean, generally quite balanced with more financing, investors, and donors in the room, which is great. Cool. Thank you so much for the answers. And we actually have now, maybe, can we share results? I'm not sure if I'm the only one seeing them. There you go. 32% of donors, and it seems that we have 67 people in the room, which is great. 21% are implementer and delivery perspective, should be companies. Cool. Second one for us, and we want to launch this poll to compare whether this series of webinar has been useful for you in your sort of like learning experience. So if we can share that second poll, it is about your existing knowledge on energy as a service to reach last mile communities through solar home systems. It's very specific questions, since we know this business model also works for example, the productive uses of renewable energy. So very specifically for this. And we'll use this one to sort of like compare after webinar 2, which hopefully you will attend as well on your sort of like learning experience through this, hopefully. Cool. Cool. So I think we can share this, and it is also sort of like there's quite a few people that already have, yeah, very balanced. I'll have to analyze this. Cool. So, I mean, the idea of this series of webinars, it is about, I think, being honest where existing models struggle, but mainly we want to be curious about what else could help close the gap and whether energy as a service, what answers it can give us to close this energy access gap. So today we'll dive into real experience from SolarAid's Lighter Village program in Malawi, what worked, what didn't. And in the second webinar, we're going to be zooming out and asking the harder questions. So what it takes to scale these models responsibly without undermining markets and to encourage long-term sustainability. Before we get into the agenda, I actually want to introduce briefly the platform hosting this conversation, the End User Subsidy Lab, which is the next slide. End User Subsidy Lab is a joint initiative coordinated by SMAP, NDEF, GOGLA, and the Clean Cooking Alliance. The objective is across many countries, governments and donors want to use demand-side subsidies to reach more remote households and poorer homes, where the market alone struggles to reach. And subsidy design is quite hard. If done well, subsidies can unlock access, crowding private sector delivery, but done badly, they can distort markets and crowd out companies. So the lab exists as the space to really slow things down and learn properly. That's why this topic fits quite neatly into this discussion and in this home. Very great to see this diverse audience today. With no further ado, I would like to hand over to Jacob Erba. He's the Senior Manager for Strategy and Partnerships at EaaS, and he will take us through the agenda today and moderate this session. Jacob, over to you.
Thank you so much, Laura. And hi, everyone. It's great to be here. Can we go to the next slide, please? So in terms of the agenda for today, we will first hear from Brave Mahoney and Daphne Fit to set the scene for today's discussion. Brave is General Manager at SolarAid Malawi. For those that know Brave, you'll know that he's very passionate, experienced, and the main driving force behind the success of the Lighter Village pilot in Malawi and many other initiatives that SolarAid has been piloting in Malawi already. So we will first hear from Brave, and then we'll hear from Daphne, who together with Ed was driving the evaluation of the Lighter Village pilot, which we published in a report today. And we will hear from Daphne about the key findings from this midterm evaluation to set the scene for the discussion that will then also be followed by insights from Austin Theo, who is the Ascent PIU manager to represent the Malawi government, and also Mfumu Kuseni, who is energy advisor with GIZ's NDEF Malawi program. This scene setting and the first panel discussion will take around half an hour, and then there will be plenty of time to have an engaged discussion with all of you with questions and answers, and also there will be space for you to make interventions to make it as engaging as we can. So without further ado, I will hand over to Brave to set the scene for the energy access context in Malawi and also talk about the objective of the Lighter Village pilot. Brave, over to you.
Thank you, Jakub, and hello everyone, wherever you are. Excuse my my video is not as clear for technical reasons, but hope it will do the job this afternoon. So my job this afternoon really is just to give a bit of a background to Lighter Village Energy as a Service program that we've been doing since 2021. in TA Kasakula in Nchisi district. Next slide, please. Yeah, so what's the genesis to this model? As we all know that off-grid solutions have made a significant contribution to energy access worldwide. And in Malawi, with sales by GOGLA affiliates companies reaching around 250,000 per year. That's quite significant. Looking back in 2008 when I joined the sector, we never thought that we could be hitting those numbers of sales. So that's quite a significant increase and progress that we have shown. However, we're talking of 565 million people in sub-Saharan Africa living without access to electricity, and likely not unchanged actually since 2010. We've been having this figure for quite a long time on our books, and we're still projecting the figure to remain the same come in 2030, which obviously is taking us away from achieving SDG 7. And Malawi has one of the lowest rates of electrification worldwide, standing at 26%. Mission 300 aims to increase that figure to 70% by 2030, with 40% being expected to come from off-grid technologies, and solar home systems comprising quite a significant technology to drive that progress. But this target requires a significant scale up of standalone solar products, and leaves 30% of the population still living without electricity. Affordability is a key barrier, with almost 80% of unelectrified households unable to afford even a tier 1 pay-as-you-go plan. So energy as a service was really established and could offer an alternative to contribute to 70% target. We're not saying it is the only solution. It is simply one of the tools that could be utilized to actually achieve the development goals that we have as a sector and as a nation. Next slide, please. So, energy as a service, basically, for those who are getting to know this term quite for the first time, refers to a business model where companies provide access to an energy system and connected services, where customers pay to use those services in perpetuity. Just the way how all of us, we pay for our electricity in our homes that we're living in cities. We don't own the infrastructure, the cables, the grid infrastructure that brings electricity in our homes. Or what we care about is how much we have used, and we only pay for that. And in the similar setup, we're simply transferring that model into the rural most communities. The only difference is we're using standalone plug-and-play solar home system as opposed to grid-tied system. So energy as a service can be used for first-time electricity access to the poorest and hardest to reach communities. And these are the communities that we designed this project for, to target those that are left behind, those that can't be reached with pay-as-you-go or cash sales, or grid extension or mini grids can't work in those communities. It's that population that we want to reach. So energy service provides continuous long-term service to customers, and consumers do not own the hardware, which remain the responsibility of the provider, including maintenance and after-sales service. So energy service offers an alternative model to connect hard-to-reach communities. Its initial rollout could be to provide first-time, low-tier electricity access to customers which are costly to serve and or have higher concentrated ability to pay. Here we're talking about people earning less than $1 a day, and within that, they have to pay for electricity, they have to pay for food, probably a little bit for healthcare, and mostly we're talking of customers who survive on hand to mouth. They can't even save for a week, for a month. Therefore, the majority of the current existing solutions automatically by default excludes them from accessing electricity. Next slide, please. So Light a Village, why did we call it Light a Village? The goal from the onset was to electrify everyone first and test the ability of the customers to pay for electricity, making sure that there's no payment fatigue over time, and truly understanding what would it take to operate this model sustainably over a long period of time. So since the whole model was designed centered on the community together with the local leaders targeting to electrify 100% of the village, that's why the name Light a Village came about. So Kasakura was selected with support from Malawi government through the Malawi Rural Electrification Program. Together, we deliberately identified a location which is the remotest, the poorest, and there were no plans to extend the grid into these locations for at least 5 to 10 years. So together with the government, we identified this village. And also for the sake of adding a little bit of context, Nchisi district, where we are doing this pilot, is one of the poorest districts in Malawi. So within the poorest districts, we deliberately identified the remotest and poorest community, and Kasakura area came out to be one of those communities. So as I've already mentioned, the goal was to achieve 100% electrification. And to do that, we needed to make sure that the community understands the model, the difference between energy as a service, pay-as-you-go, and cash sales. So we had to do a lot of consumer education and also payment modalities, because this is different from what majority of the customers probably have heard or have experienced. So we had to educate them. The payment per day is 100 kwacha, and it's a flexible payment plan. So customers can choose either to buy electricity daily, weekly, bi-weekly, or monthly. However, during the consumer education, we do encourage monthly payments. And the energy service model guarantees long-term service to customers. Reliable connection, because we are there all the time. And we make sure that the customers are part of the designing process, understanding how to service them. That's why at the center stage, the operational structure is focusing on recruiting, training, and developing the capacity to provide service from the rural community members themselves. So we're talking of young people who have just either graduated or just finished secondary school and have nothing really much to do within the community. We bring them along as part of the community service representatives, and we train them to be at the center stage of sustained service in the communities. So that's how we guarantee the long-term sustainability and lowering cost of operation instead of us sending our staff in these communities to provide that service on a daily basis. Next slide, please. So the key outcomes of the project so far has been quite high consumer acceptance rate. Since 2021, since we started, we had assumed that probably at some point we would notice consumer fatigue, either people choosing to sign out because the kind of like the perpetual payments is taking too long. But so far, we haven't really experienced that. Instead, it's the opposite. That the more people understand about the model and the longer we are staying in the community, and the longer we're engaging with them and utilizing the local young people as part of service representatives that people can, customers can reach out to at any time that they want, is actually has cemented the desire for customers to remain on energy as a service, to a point that we were even asked to extend beyond just lighting homes to also lighting schools and health facilities. For the health facilities, of course, they do have grid, but they need a backup system because grid is non-reliable. So we have also connected into health facilities as well as the school. Our goal of 100% electrification was achieved last year in 2025 in August when we connected 8,813 customers fully connected. And now the focus is on really refining the operational model, the financing model to make sure that all the operations in these communities must be self-sustaining, including making a provision for the maintenance in future. So up to date, all the customers are still using these systems, and we're also noticing the increased demand for other peripheral products or bigger appliances or bigger products that they could adopt. What it is also indicating to us is that the longer we are staying in this community and the trust that we're building with the community, they see us as the reliable supplier of other energy solutions that we might need, which probably could also be opening up other markets that we never thought of, which probably would attract other commercial companies to come along to tap into already existing customer base with a strong customer data on how they are making the payments with the current systems and use it to build more viable models on top of what we have already done. So far, I would say this kind of top level outcome, high consumer acceptance rate, sustained payments, and of course, ongoing development of the operational structure to achieve sustainability and long-term sustainability of the models. Next slide. Yeah, so I'll pass it over to my colleague Daphne to take you through the subsequent slides. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you so much, Brave. And I think you have given a perfect introduction to the work that I have done together with colleagues, together with Ed Day, Julia Bulk, and Frank Makumba. I represent today Greencroft Economics, and as a team, we have indeed looked at all the work that Brave and his team have done in Malawi. As mentioned by Brave, one of the key goals for them is to build a sustainable operating and financing model. And with this work that we have done, we have tried to find insights that are key learnings to actually achieve that. Please, next slide. So the Energy Savings Trust has given us, as the team from Greencroft Economics, the goal to look at the model as just pictured by Brave and to see how can we build on that, how can we evaluate the impact and the potential of this model, how can we see if it's a model that is scalable, and to actually also share those learnings. And I think that is absolutely key in what we've tried to do. The team of SolarAid has been really open in sharing all their usage data with us so that we could really dive into it and see where we can build on, where the challenges were, and so on and so forth. And this was done really in order to share it with all of you and share it with the sector. As also mentioned by Laura in her introduction, since this is something that could potentially be a new and additional business model to help bring the whole sector forward, this is, I think, a key moment and a really nice opportunity to share our findings and to see indeed what the learnings have been. So what we have done is we have looked at customer usage data, financial data, and we have interviewed 16 different stakeholders in Malawi. What is important to mention is that we indeed also visited Kasakula and we have received all the data, but the data were slightly before the moment that Brave mentioned, this important moment in August 2025 when the entire village and the entire community was actually connected. So our data ended slightly before that, but still enough good insights and learning that we can share with you. So let's go to the next slide, please. And here you see what we've tried to put together as a summary of the OPEX and the revenue analysis. And what is important to note is that as every pilot, also this pilot has gone through different stages. I think when listening to Brave, when he told all of us how they began the pilot, we can all understand that at such a moment where you have to really take along every household in the village, that the OPEX was quite high. And this was done on purpose to ensure indeed that the initial rollout of the project was a success and that a high take-up was achieved. And that is what you see in this first phase from November 21 till May 23. So the first 500 households that were connected through this model were connected against quite high costs. But what we see is after 2023, the first scale up was there, and SolarAid was really able also then to tap into the benefits of the scale and of the higher density of the connections. So a lighter touch model was then trialed, and that resulted straight away in lower OPEX per unit. And you see that there have been phases and ups and downs. But also interesting in general to see is that the revenue has kind of tracked this OPEX, which means that over the entire period, the revenue or the margin has stayed more or less the same. What is also good to see is that there are, for each and every moment in time, it can be laid back to specific circumstances. And for instance, we see that at the end, the OPEX have gone up again. And this was also a deliberate choice by the SolarAid team, because that was the moment that a new payment platform, for instance, was installed. So, so there's been different phases in the pilot, and every stage has given insights and learnings, which meant that the entire model was slightly shifted and taken from there. And maybe if we can go to the next slide. Yeah, you can indeed here see how that has then affected the operating margin, because over the period that we just depicted, so 2021 till 2025, the revenue per unit declined, especially in the middle phase of the pilot, and indeed that was because the OPEX was lower, and that was due to payment delays. So a lot of the payments were still done in person. There was the system activation was lagging behind. There were some early defaults. There were some hardware changes. So that was really all about the putting together all the right bits and pieces of the pilot. What was very important was that really hardware needed to be designed specifically for energy as a service. That has potentially a higher upfront cost, but it meant that the system worked way better for the specific type of customers and the specific type of payments that have to be done over the longer term. But interestingly enough is that over the entire period, the operating margins remained around the $2 US per day per unit. And that was enough actually to cover the payments collection and the after-sale services, and which means that in around 10 years per unit, you'll have around $20. And in these margins, I mean, these margins, they should still cover also the repair costs. Because if we look at where we stand now, the first 3-4 years, obviously most of the most of the systems are still, well, actually going strong. There's less, not too many defaults yet. So over a longer period of time for which this system or this business model is designed, it can be expected that also repair costs still have to be covered in this in those margins. And also good to know is that the margins exclude the actual costs of the hardware of the system itself. So the initial costs of acquiring and installing the systems are not part of the current margins. And also, and that's not a minor detail, is that all the this whole pilot has been financed through grant funding, and so there have been no interest costs or costs of capital that were part of the margins. Next slide, please. Another thing that was another thing that I do see questions, but we do come back to the questions later in the presentation or in this webinar. So I'll just for now continue with the story and we'll get back to them. If we look at one of the other challenges for this model that has really been that Malawi has gone through some really challenging macroeconomic times. I think most of you know that the inflation and the currency depreciation in Malawi have been quite challenging. So if this would have been a model that would have been externally financed or even internationally financed, that means that that would have really sharply reduced the returns. And that is really significant because we're talking about a 62% lower revenue mid-2025 if you would compare it in real terms to when the pilot started. This is obviously significant also for the exchange rate. If financed in US dollar, that would have also hit the light affiliate revenue with at least 53%. And we know that this holds true for basically every other business model in Malawi. So this is not specific for energy as a service. If you have a running pay-go company currently in Malawi, you would have the same challenges. Why, however, it's important to mention is that since the Lighter Village project, as also explained by Brave, is really a long-term project, we look at electrification for 10 years, we look at financing for 10 years, and then this becomes something that is important to take into account because this is also a longer-term risk then. Yes, next slide, please. Yeah, so what have we learned from this, from these insights, and what can we give back as recommendations? Let's go to the next slide. And indeed, again, it's good to realize that we have come in after or even before the full 100% of the electrification has been reached. And what we have found is that for a lot of people, the business model in the way that Brave has explained it and the way that SolarAid is implementing it in Malawi, with really truly electrifying a whole village, the awareness and understanding of that model is still growing, or it's in some places even still very limited. Why I think it's really appreciated that that the SolarAid team have been willing and able to share all their data with us so far, because really truly understanding how this model works and what the value proposition is and could be, not only impact wise but also financial wise and indeed operational, could really help in a growing acceptance of the model and in learning together as a sector. So for that, it is really also important to share the type of data what we're trying to do today. It's to track those type of data and to learn from it. But when you learn, share the learnings with the sector. So those phases that we have seen in the OPEX, that there have been really variations according to where you are exactly in the pilot. In itself, that is not something good or bad. It is a moment to actually stand still, look back, look forward, learn from it, and then see how you can change or update your business model the way that the SolarAid team have done. And that included experimenting with pricing. The pricing of the systems, as explained by Brave, has changed over time. Even though affordability is very low, there has been made a choice to actually at some point increase the sales prices, and it has worked out positively rather than negatively. So experimenting with the pricing, and when you start scaling, and when the time allows to do that more often and in more different ways, is something that is really important to also understand how to make this indeed not only an operationally sustainable model, but also financially. To continue to innovate with system design. And there is a huge opportunity, especially here, because the long term and the longevity of this business model really invites to come with products that are sustainable, that last longer, that indeed don't need as much repair as maybe current and existing products need, that indeed could have batteries that could last longer. I mean, there is so much room for innovation when you think of that you are the owner of a product for 10 years as a operational company, so that you as a company don't sell the product, but it remains yours to take care of. That really invites to innovation with the system design. So I'm really happy to dive into more detail later on in this webinar based on your questions and on the panel discussion. I think for now, this is where I want to leave it, but looking forward to diving in more detail based on the questions.
Thank you so much, Daphne. And Brenda, if you could go to the next slide, please. So while we are having discussion, please feel free to look at our report that was launched today. Now, starting with the panel discussion, maybe we kick off with Brave, if that's okay with you. Brave, there were quite a lot of questions from the audience asking a bit more detail about the payment terms, whether the 100 kwacha per day was a flat rate, whether customers get disconnected if they don't pay for a while, if there are any limits in terms of how often they have to use the system. So I was wondering if you could share a little bit more on these payment terms with the audience. It would be helpful. Thank you.
Right. Thank you very much. Actually, there's also a question from Mary about if customers can pause at some point. So yeah, starting with that question, yes, customers can pause, and we are very flexible with customers. We take consumer education as a key component to achieve success, because we are not imposing this model on them. We want them to make an informed choice, that they want to be part and parcel of this journey. So one of the things that we communicate to them is, if they are in trouble for genuine reasons that they can't afford to pay, they must simply communicate to their local community service representative, whatever they're passing through. Then for us, we will know we're not expecting revenues from that lamp for whatever reason, and we engage with them because we're fully aware about the complexity of the life they are living through. Andrew, about the OPEX, does it cover everything? Yes, it does cover everything, including making a provision of 75 cents per system towards the maintenance of the system, as well as the replacement of the broken parts in future, especially looking at the batteries. Really, that's what we're expecting, that will need replacements in 3 to 5 years with the current system that we have installed. However, the long-term solution to that is to have a product designed for energy as a service, meaning having longer battery lifespan. So we're looking at a minimum of 10-year battery lifespan. If we can crack that, the model becomes very, very lucrative. So I think, yeah, your question comes with that provision that the current system we're using was not designed for energy as a service, which we are fully aware of. It was designed for short-term life, pay as you go for repeated sales. What we're doing is the opposite of that.
Thank you so
And then
much,
they also,
Brave. We'll come back to more questions shortly. I would like to bring in Austin Teo now from the Malawi government, because there were quite a lot of questions from the audience asking about the financing and kind of the long-term sustainability of the pilot.
Sure.
So Austin, it would be great to, oh, sorry, Brave, go ahead.
No, sorry, you can bring in Austin, then we'll continue after his presentation.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. So Austin, if you would be happy to please introduce your role at the Malawi government and also answer the question around why was the Light the Village Energy as Service pilot attractive to the government of Malawi from the electrification planning perspective, and what role did public funding play in terms of this specific Light the Village pilot? Over to you, Austin.
Yeah, thank you so much. My name is Austin Teu from Malawi, working in the Ministry of Energy. I'm a Chief Energy Officer and currently handling the role of Project Manager for the Ascent Malawi project, which is funded by World Bank. Yeah, so indeed, you know, the government of Malawi, as Brave already explained, we are having a target of achieving 70%, you know, access to electricity by 2030. And this is in our energy compact, which we recently, developed. And in there, we are earmarking to, you know, achieve this using off-grid options, and these will contribute around 40%. And within that, the solar home systems are playing a major role. So as a ministry, we attracted much, or rather we have been attracted much from the word go, because when the pilot was starting, we were involved. And we found that the model, the energy as a service model, was offering an innovative kind of option that is also quickly, deployable to, to the rural households, unlike the conventional solar home systems and the mini grid. So for us, we treat this model not as a competitive model to the existing models, but as a complementary model that will assist us to ensure that we reach pre-electrification, goals in the country. Because as we are waiting for grid to expand, then people have to be electrified. So this model is attractive because, as Brave indicated, it is targeting, the hard to reach people in Malawi. They are hard to reach those who are living in hard to reach areas, but also those people who have, low income, because even the flexible kind of payment mechanism, Brave has already explained here, the payment of 100 kwacha, which is more affordable. And for the government, we have, played more of like a catalytic role and a de-risking role to the pilot project, because through the Ngwee 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 Fund, the off-grid market development fund that the ministry has now, we were able to work with the SolarAid's to scale up, electrification. So we provided grant financing through the Ngwee 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 Fund so that we scale up electrification in Kasakula. And this model worked very well because it was implemented, in a very short period of time. And all the targets were met within that short period of time. And actually, SolarAid was the first, participating organization within the fund that made its target very early. And also, we were able to interface and, check how this has impacted, the consumers themselves, because indeed, as Brave indicated, low-income households were able to get this. There was also a question in the chat in terms of, bridging financing. So through Ngwee 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 Fund, the funds that we provided in this pilot, we were able to, enable the pricing to become affordable to the households in Kasabula. So apart from playing a catalytic role and also de-risking, whatever the model is doing, we were also able to assist the model to bridge that affordability gap because of the grant financing that we provided through the Ngwee 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 Fund. So maybe let me stop there and be happy to add some more meat later as we interact. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Austin, for sharing the Government of Malawi reflections. And now moving on to Mfumu. Kusene, Mfumu, if you would be happy to introduce yourself and also reflect on how you assess value for money and development impact in a service-based model, and that can be specific to Malawi, but also more broadly as part of NDEF. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So my name is Mfumu Kuseni, and I'm working with the Energizing Development Project in Malawi, which is a program under GIZ. And we are one of the implementing partners that supported the energy service in Kasafula. So to answer the first question, in the context of value for money, GIZ is allocated with funding from its donors. So just to highlight, GIZ is not a donor, but it commissions on behalf of its donors. So NDEF is a multi-donor project that is implemented by GIZ, commissioned by its 4 donor countries. So the 4 donor countries are Netherlands, Germany, Sweden, and Norway. So our donors provide us with funding annually to promote access to energy. So we always look at several initiatives that are in line with this, and looking at the energy as a service that SolarAid was offering, it aligned with our objective of expanding energy in Malawi. So for starters, the model provides more outreach compared to other models such as PayGo and Cash. As in Kasakula, it has been able to produce 100% electrification, which would have not been possible from what Breva said in the start. It is one of the poorest villages in Kasakula, where 97% of the population are living below the poverty line. So most of them would not be able to afford the models such as PayGo and Cash. So energy as a service has managed to penetrate and reach a wider audience than those other models. And because of this, there has been a spillover effect where there has been an increase in livelihood in Kasakula. For instance, there has been an increase in literacy. As Brave said, that they have also connected some schools there. So literacy levels have increased, and this has also given the chance for children to be able to read during the evening where there's no light. And also, there has also been an increase in security in the community. Now the whole community has access to energy, so there's an increase in security. And also, there has been an increase in economic activity because now traders can trade beyond sunset. So overall, it's been a model that has provided great value than compared to traditional methods such as cash and also pay-go models that would be very difficult to penetrate in a location like Asakura. Yeah.
Thank you, Mfumu, for your reflections. Now that's a really nice segue back to Brave actually on the public institutions, because we have been talking a lot about households, but as Mfumu mentioned, there's also a big role for NHS service for public institutions like schools and health centers. And that was also part of Light to Village, at least to some extent, right, Brave? So it would be helpful to reflect on that a little bit, and also to answer one of the audience questions about who actually is responsible for paying on behalf of these public institutions in the Light to Village pilot.
All right. Thank you very much, Jakub. So yes, indeed, we have connected some schools and a health facility that's in the area, and it wasn't really us pushing for the connection of the public facilities. It was actually the other way around. It were the chiefs and the leaders in the community who approached us looking at the challenges that they were facing. Before we moved into the area, schools were trying to come up with their own initiatives. They were buying, some of them were using like the car batteries to set up some lighting systems in the classrooms and allowing senior classes to come and read at night. Others were asking children themselves to bring in torches to school to do the studies, and others were still even using kerosene. So it was quite a bit difficult to manage all those things. So looking at the fact that parents were already organizing themselves to have these alternative lighting solutions to enable their learners to learn or read at night without intervention from any donor or the government, they simply used the same initiative to ask us if we could install the systems, and the parents would continue paying through their local school management committees and all that. So all the payments in public schools are being paid for by the communities themselves. We were also asked by the tradition authority himself to actually connect every teacher house in the area, which we also did, and teachers are paying for those electricity, because his argument was if these teachers were in urban schools, they would be staying in electrified houses and they would be paying to the utility company themselves. So because they're here in the village, and we've given them access to light, they can also pay. So basically that's how it all evolved. So now it has simply become like one of the models where the community pays for the public facilities. For us, it's still a learning curve, because now we need also to figure out if we go into the new communities where we might not find motivated community members like this one, how would we manage and structure it as a standard model? But so far, it was driven by the community itself. It's also an indication that the longer we stay in the community, working with the community, then together we actually develop sustainable solutions, because we are there and there's that trust between the company and the consumers themselves. And before I also proceed, let me mention that we are still in the learning journey, and all the questions coming, I think these are quite perfect questions, because they also inform us some of the questions that we need to continue learning. And this is the reason why, as much as SolarAid has initiated the whole of this pilot project, but we have set up REAL, which is Rural Energy Access Lab, where we are consolidating all these learnings and consolidating all the questions from the audience, and then cohesively produce the pilots that actually respond to the needs on the society. So should you also need to learn more about this model, maybe might not be able to answer all the questions now, I'll refer you to also reach out to Yeva, who is managing REAL, to actually have a constant platform to discuss these issues. So yes, Jakub.
Thank you, Brave, and thank you also for mentioning REAL. That's actually an organization that we are co-hosting this webinar series with, and they are great proponents of NHS service, of its potential, but also limitations, and we'll have another webinar in 3 weeks' time where we will talk a bit more in detail about real. But yes, please do feel free to reach out to Eva on more details. Now, as many of you are probably aware, energy as a service is a very popular topic that can sometimes be a little bit controversial too. But even as we saw at the GOGLA AGM last year, it was the best attended breakout room discussion. There were lots of great perspectives and not always everyone agreeing with each other, which is actually what we need. And it's great. It's been great working with SolarAid, who actually have been evolving the pilot, and they have been changing a lot of the program design considerations to keep improving, which is what we need in the sector. So maybe actually coming back to you, Laura, on the wider perspectives of energy as a service, where as an association for the private sector, how do you see energy as a service playing out alongside pay-as-you-go and cash sales? Because it might not be one over the other, but it would be helpful to understand a little bit more from yourself on that.
Yeah, thanks for that question, Jacob. I think, from our perspective, we are open and supportive to all the business models that are sort of like emerging and coming up. I think at the moment, the reality is that we are seeing that cash and pay-go are having limitations, and many times are not reaching sort of like the hardest to reach. So I think there are other business models that we are seeing that can have a role in reaching, whether that is we're seeing sort of like battery rental, we're seeing energy as a service, sort of like, and it is important to keep on having these conversations and to work together and seeing like, okay, can this pilot scale? And GOGLA will remain supportive overall. I think there's indeed sort of like more research sort of like needs to be done, and like more scaling and trying as well. So yeah, I think sort of like in our next, like from our end, in our next market trends report, we are also going to see, okay, like can we sort of like quantify these, like what KPIs are we gonna sort of like put together, and can we sort of like compare them so that to sort of like remain supportive and these business models. And I think the reality is that we'll be there, and then we need everybody working together to make them work. And there's sort of like very reasonable questions being asked, but I think you said it yourself very well in your intervention. All this debate is useful, and yeah, we need to be doing more on this.
Thank you, Laura. And you mentioned the key performance indicators, which brings me back to Mfumu. If you could reflect a little bit on kind of your key performance indicators that you set as NDEV, GIZ when you finance or provide grants to these types of pilots, and if you also have any exit strategies that you usually think about early on when you support pilots like Light a Village or similar in the energy as a service space.
Thank you very much, Jacob. So in terms of I'll start with the exit strategy. I think it is important to think in long terms and flexible and more flexible when it comes to energy as a service. So this should not be compared with initiatives such as pay, go, and cash, because energy as a service generates benefits over many years, but the recover cost is very, very slow. So in an economy like Malawi, we are facing inflation, currency depreciation, and also because of that, there's also inflation, which is causing the rise of repair costs. So as a result, the exit strategy should not be mainly focused on self-sustaining or self-financing, but it should be looked at a more sustainable approach. So, for example, it is important for us to start to integrate this type of model into government-led programs to show that to show that the public is also in support of such initiatives. So, a realistic exit is not to withdraw public support, but to start to transition these small pilots into a more structured model that has financing mechanisms that recognize energy as a service as a social service for last mile energy access in the shorter context. Yeah, so should not be focused on, because ESCOM, the Minister of Energy, has so many initiatives that are being supported by the government itself. So we should also start to look at energy as a service to also fit in that conversation. I don't know if I've answered both questions.
Yes, I think you have answered both. Thank you so much. And you mentioned the role of the government. So maybe coming back to Austin, there's a question quite specific on the kilowatt hour cost difference between Light the Village and grid, but that's quite a specific one. So Austin, if you're also happy to reflect from the government of Malawi perspective, how do you see the pilot that SolarAid are implementing in terms of solar home systems as a service compared to supporting grid extension initiatives, or whether it's usually managed kind of separately and you don't really compare the two between each other?
Yeah, thank you so much. As I indicated earlier on, the off-grid basket of your options that are there to electrify the country, we are not looking at one option or one model over the other. So the energy mix in the off-grid, space also, the technology mix is, looking at the complementarity of these models. So we are not looking at these models as, to be in competition, but rather they are complementing each other. That's why we're indicating to say there are areas where the pay-as-you-go model, it might be hard even for the solar companies to reach those areas because they would need, for example, a single customer to pay for that. But for energy as a service, if you find a village that has enough population, you go and deploy in that area, then you are able to electrify that village quickly. And it is a rapid electrification. And also because, as already indicated, the initial cost of, accessing the service is very, very low, even as compared to pay-as-you-go. But the main issue here is, in the first place, the target beneficiaries are not necessarily the same. There could be some overlaps, but still there are specific beneficiaries that we are earmarking with the EaaS for solar home system. So we are looking at all these options as the pre-electrification in the first place, because we are taking the grid, slowly, little by little, it will reach every corner of the country. But as we are waiting in the next 5, 10, 20 years, if the grid doesn't reach there, then either of these options, including mini grids, are available, depending on which one is also least cost and all those factors looked at together. So as the government, we are taking all these initiatives as very important. Yes, we need to continue innovating. As Brave indicated, we are still learning. What the SolarAid is sharing today is not, something that we are saying it is perfect. There are some gaps that still need to be filled, but the main issue is we are still learning. For us, we noted that the results were quite easier to achieve. People were able to have, energy access, immediately when we engaged SolarAid. And based on those results, we were convinced to say we can even equally pilot the same model, maybe for productive use of energy. So as the fund, we even provided additional financing to SolarAid to also test that. So all this is trying to learn, but as we are learning, we are also assisting the government to reach universal access to energy using those options. So I hope that clarifies some of the issues, but otherwise, that's the view from the government angle. Thank you.
Thank you, Austin. That's excellent. Brave, I see you have your hand raised. Please go ahead.
Yes, thank you for that, Jacob. I just wanted to add into that question as well. What we really wanted to demonstrate and prove was that we can achieve SDG 7 today because the sector is very clear. Come 2030, we will not achieve universal energy access. And we're talking about SDG 7, Sustainable Development Goal number 7, is talking about universal energy access. It's talking about affordability. It's talking about sustainability. So if we are to achieve by 2030, we need to learn and demonstrate that there is a model that can actually do that today. So yes, we know the fact that we need to do a lot of assessments in other areas, but let's also not forget that there are still millions of lives still not having a basic light to read today. So I think when we're looking at this model, let's start from that angle of how can we connect everyone today as we're waiting for that bigger solution to come tomorrow, which we know doesn't exist right now. It is there, grid is there, but grid can't reach everyone. I'll give a typical example of the same Kasakura. 1% of the population was already connected to the grid, especially in the trading centers. Under the Malawi Rural Electrification Program, there was a little bit of grid presence. The cables are passing through. But even in the trading centers where the cables have dropped, very few households are connected to the grid. That shows the significance of the project, of the problem. Because even those households can barely afford the cost of just doing the installation of the wiring installation in their home before the cable gets in it. So if they can't afford even to buy the wiring system to get connected to the grid, how can they afford the grid at all? So these are kind of the questions that we had driving the designing of this model. There was also a question around what will happen when grid comes to that area. I also mentioned earlier on that we are not doing this model in isolation. We are working with the government, and when we selected this area, we used the Rural Electrification Master Plan. In the Rural Electrification Master Plan, it clearly stipulates where the grid is going in the next 5, 10, 20 years. So we know that in Kasakura, in the next 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, there will be no grid in these villages that we have connected. At all, probably we might have mini grids or microgrids. And this is where now sector-wide coordination comes in. Because in these areas, if people are already connected and someone wants to set up a mini grid, why can't we concentrate those resources towards productive use of energy so that this community can have more income and start affording more things rather than doing the electrification? Because we also know right now that mini grids are struggling to have viable models because of lack of anchor load. And these are the things that within the ministry are hot topics. How can we make the grids viable? So on the back of all these heavy conversations that are already happening, which we know that the solutions will come, but they are not there today, still more people are living in poverty today, let's give them something now, and then gradually move towards that. So once we are aligned properly, even the government will know, Village X has got solar home systems, warn us in advance, and then move those into other areas, or sell them to the customers at a discounted rate, or whatever. We'll find a way to exit because we will know in advance that the grid is coming and these are the parameters that are going to do. So coordination and alignment there is very key. That's why Austin is here today, Mfumu is here today, Mfumu key donors in the energy sector. We're talking of Austin in the government. So we're all aligned. And then finally, this is also why we have set up REAL. I'll kind of keep on repeating that. So REAL is set up to really work very closely with the governments, where we are deploying energy as a service and also working with other companies that are also providing solutions in these different countries, and ensuring that there's that coordination and alignment, even from the financing perspective to deployment perspective. So we'll make sure that we're working as part of the member of the energy enthusiasts in our sector, not in isolation. So I just want to kind of bring a little bit of light on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Brave. Daphne, over to you.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to have a very small addition to what Brave says, because I think what's important to note is that not only have all those houses been connected, but actually utilization rates have been quite high. If we look at, I believe, mid-May 2025, utilization rates were 90%. They have been fluctuating, but it's not only about connecting households, it's about people actually really using it. And I think that is something that is important to note, because often we count number of connections. But this is really also having helped the community to actually have access to energy, which is affordable to them.
Thank you, Daphne. That's very important to add. And maybe if I can reflect on some of the questions from the audience, talking about direct comparison with pay-as-you-go, that frankly, that's been proven quite difficult because there are not many pilots with the same objective as Light the Village to truly leave no one behind. I think the word leave no one behind has been used a little bit loosely sometimes across the sector, but it's been quite difficult to actually compare the Light the Village pilot, which has the objective to set the payments to be affordable to everyone in that unelectrified community, compared to other pilots that might be RBF, potentially to electrify large percentage of a community, but often not to electrify the entire community. And then if you compare the two, you're not comparing apples for apples. So that's been one challenge. And the other one is on, there were a lot of questions about kind of longer term modeling, which we have done some modeling, but then as you model longer and longer term, you need to start making more and more assumptions. So if we, like Daphne presented the situation in Malawi over the past 3 years, there's been huge devaluation of the Malawian kwacha, but how do you model this over the next 20 years? You could make a model, but almost certainly it will be wrong. And then as you layer on more and more assumptions, it becomes kind of less and less valuable. So that's why with this Light the Village evaluation, we have looked more in the past rather than trying to predict the future over the next 20 years. But in the second report that we will be discussing in 3 weeks' time, we have looked more into the potential more broadly and try to make some of these potential options and scenarios. But again, we haven't gone too deep into forecasting what might happen over the course of 10 or 20 years. But it's a very important point to raise. And that's something, again, that anyone who is trialing these pilots should be collecting a lot of data and sharing it with the sector. So then we can actually find out what's the lifetime of the systems. Because you often hear someone in the chat said, oh, in Malawi, it tends to be 2 to 3 years. You talk to some other companies who say our solar energy kits last for 7 years. So it would be really helpful for the sector to share more hard data so we can all learn from each other. Now we are slowly coming to the end of the webinar. So I will maybe give a chance to each panelist to pick their favorite question that hasn't been answered yet and try to answer it in 1 minute. And then I'll hand back to Laura to close the webinar. So if I may start with you, Daphne, I'll leave it to you to pick one that sparks your interest and answer in 1 minute, please.
Oh, well, one of the questions that I do like is actually building on what you just mentioned about PAYGO and energy as a service. What we did find in our research was that for many, at least, it's seen as two complementary models, not necessarily in direct competition, but each serving their own goal, if you'd like. With their own financing challenges. And when we started the research, we were kind of assuming or anticipating that there would be much more competition between the two, but the more we dive into it, the more it's seen as two complementary models that both have their right of existence and that both should be there, and for both of whom challenges in how to finance it on the longer term do exist. And maybe just one thing that is nice to mention is that also a lot is being piloted there. For instance, in Mozambique, where they're piloting RBF in combination with energy as a service. So exciting times ahead. We absolutely don't have all the answers, but looking forward to learning as a sector.
Thank you. Mfumu, over to you.
I'm going through the questions, but I don't see anything that's applicable to me. But I think there's a question there. I think this one I can pass it to Brave. I don't know if it was already answered. It says, which platform do you use to process payments and remotely block access to kits? Given that transaction fees can be substantial, how do you ensure that platforms do not take too large a share of the already limited revenue? I think Brave, we can take that one.
Should I proceed, Jacob?
Yes, of course. Please go ahead.
All right. Thank you very much. For me, actually, I had after sales question to tackle, but thank you, Mfumu, for giving me another one. Yeah, maybe I'll start with CRM system. So we started with Angaza, and you are right that we found that the cost were quite high. So to do this more effectively, we also need a CRM system that is tailored to energy as a service in terms of the payment modalities and all that. So as part of the ongoing business model refining and increasing efficiencies, we'll actually start engaging with different CRM providers, service providers. Already right now, we're working with Moon, which is a CRM system designed for energy as a service. And the time of contract structure is nicely aligned with the payment plan that we're offering. Right. And then I also wanted to tackle on the after sales, and there was a question of what happens when the products die. Is there a provision for recycling or repair? So the operations of the model are localized. Within the village, we have a dedicated service center, which includes a repair technician. So all the products that are broken, in the similar way how utility companies operate, we keep our spare parts there in the field, and then immediately the product is brought to the repair center, gets fixed, and sent back to the customer to continue accessing. So I've set up all the repair function within there. This also gives us a very clear process of capturing all the broken systems once the products are in the afterlife of the product. So again, this opens up a new conversation around how can we integrate energy as a service with waste management projects, because for us, we'll have access to all the products that we have at hand. We are in control of that, and we can easily pass on all the products that have been extracted from the homes to the waste management companies. So another big discussions to have there, but as it is right now, yes, the model is designed to stay in control of waste that will be extracted after the products have reached end of life. Thank you.
Thank you, Brave. And also, it's great to see the active discussions in the chat. So please keep it coming. Introduce yourself to each other. There are quite a lot of case studies that are being shared, which is fantastic. And that's exactly why the End User Subsidy Lab is set up to create these dialogues and connect people. So thank you for that. Austin, over to you. Do you have a question that you would like to answer or make any final reflections for 1 minute?
Yeah, thank you so much. Just some final reflections, but also tackling a question on whether, there is collaboration between SolarAid or other companies and financial institutions. So for us in Malawi, we have established a dedicated off-grid market development fund, the Ngwee 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 Fund. So this fund is there to support companies and innovative ideas such as the EaaS, and we did that with this pilot. And indeed, we are looking into other modalities also to see how best we can continue to do that. Under Ascent, of course, currently we do not have a dedicated funding for the market catalyst, funding window, which provided financing to SolarAid, among other companies. And currently we are earmarking to ensure that we also utilize, the Rural Electrification Fund to assist such initiatives. But we are calling, all other development partners to also maybe come in under Ascent project so that we can continue scaling such pilot activities through the Market Catalyst Fund window. And also another issue that I wanted also to concur with those that have commented on is the issue of stakeholder engagements, including community engagement. So I understand when the pilot was starting, there was a needs assessment and the communities were heavily engaged. Their needs were taken on board and the pilot was designed. So indeed, community engagement is very key because at the end of it all, you'd also need buy-in. They would need to own the model because the issues of preferences and all those are also supposed to be taken on board. So thank you. These are my final words. Thank you to the audience and my colleagues. Over.
Wonderful. And last but definitely, Laura, do you have a question that you would like to answer? And then I'll also hand over to you at the same time to close the webinar, please.
Cool. Yeah, it's been great to see the active chat sort of like on the site, and definitely sort of like as GOGLA, I take note of how we engage with this topic. So we'll keep on sort of like convening, informing, and hearing everybody out and getting together on this topic. So yeah, I think what we heard today is energy as a service is one of the tools in the toolkit. We'll keep on exploring that, particularly for contexts where existing models might be falling short. I actually wanted to launch one final poll to the audience, and that is going to be around the potential that you see for energy as a service. Maybe this sort of like view is informed by what you heard today. I wonder, can the poll be launched? I'm not sure. It's not showing to me. There you go. So yeah, where do you see the main potential role for energy as a service? There are some, I think probably these options cover hopefully most of your views. I'm currently not seeing the results, but you can actually select multiple choice here.
We've got about half of the audience answered already, so maybe we can give it a second,
cool.
and then I will share.
Fantastic. Cool. Yeah, I think you can let me know when. Cool. I see Andrew asking more questions, and hopefully we can get to more of that in the next call, actually. Yeah, so I see. I was expecting by the chat that there might be sort of like unclear responses. So like, I think great to see that reaching poor households and serving remote and high cost communities are sort of like the dominating opinion. Thank you. Very helpful responses will fit directly into how we shape the next webinar. Let me close with this. I think sort of like the last decade, we've been proving as a sector that we can deliver access. And probably the next decade is going to be more about how do we reach everyone without compromising on quality, on sustainability, and on dignity. So it's been great to attend this webinar and hear the SolarAid team, Daphne, and everybody sort of like giving more light to this. Yes, thank you for your time. Like I said, we'll keep on convening and then discussing this topic. Thanks for your openness, for being very engaging in the chat. We appreciate you being part of the discussion. And there's another session that we hope to see you in. So I think... I
was here, brother, organizing my things.
With this, I think I can close the webinar. Thanks so much, everybody, for joining.
Thank you.